Picture this. January 6th, 2026. A billionaire walks up to a podium in Cleveland, Ohio, the most tortured sports city in America, and says 6 words that shook the entire NFL to its core. The next 120 days are crucial. Not inspiring, not hopeful, not promising, crucial. That is a man with his back against the wall. That is a man who has burned through quarterbacks like toilet paper, who has watched his franchise become a national punchline, who has paid a man $230 million, $230 million for 19 miserable games. That is a man who looked into a camera in front of his own fans and said out loud, "To win 8 games in 2 years is horrible. It's totally unacceptable, and it's not going to continue." 8 games in 2 years. That's not a slump. That's a crisis. That's an emergency. But then something happened. Something nobody in that press conference room saw coming. Something that has the entire NFL whispering. Because right now, with the clock ticking on Jimmy Haslam's 120-day ultimatum, we are exactly halfway through it. And what has been built in those 60 days is startling. A new head coach, offensive line reinforcements, a cleared quarterback path, and at the center of it all, standing taller than anyone expected, is a 5th-round draft pick from Cedar Hill, Texas, who was humiliated on draft day and told by the entire football world that he wasn't good enough. Shedeur Sanders. And his job? It is as close to secured as anything in the NFL right now. This is the story of how a billionaire's desperate ultimatum is accidentally building something dangerous in Cleveland, and how the kid they left for pick 144 is about to inherit the whole thing. Buckle up, because this story is just getting started. To truly understand what is happening in Cleveland right now, to feel the weight and the electricity of this moment, you cannot start with Jimmy Haslam's press conference in January of 2026. You cannot even start with the 2025 NFL Draft. You have to go much further back. Because the story of the Cleveland Browns is not just a football story. It is a tragedy. A decades-long, soul-crushing, hope-destroying tragedy that has turned one of the most passionate fan bases in all of American sports into a people who almost cannot allow themselves to believe anymore. The Cleveland Browns returned to the NFL in 1999. Since that moment, since that very first snap of the modern era, they have started 42 different quarterbacks. 42! In 27 years. Franchise after franchise, some of the best-run organizations in football find their guy and ride him for a decade. The Patriots had Brady, the Chiefs have Mahomes, the Ravens have Jackson. The Browns? The Browns had Tim Couch, Kelly Holcomb, Jeff Garcia, Trent Dilfer, Charlie Fry, Derek Anderson, Brady Quinn, Colt McCoy, Thad Lewis, Brandon Whedon, Brian Hoyer, Johnny Manziel, Josh McCown, Austin Davis, Connor Shaw, Robert Griffin III, Brock Osweiler, Deshaun Kaiser, Kevin Hogan, Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and now Shedeur Sanders. That is not a quarterback depth chart. That is a graveyard. And the man responsible for most of this chaos, the man who bought this franchise in 2012, who made the decision to trade 3 first-round picks for a quarterback who had been accused of sexual misconduct by more than 20 women, who has watched his team win a total of 8 games across 2 complete seasons, is Jimmy Haslam. A Tennessee native, son of a billionaire fuel magnate who inherited the Pilot Flying J empire and then decided he wanted to own an NFL team. He got the Browns in 2012. He was full of promises then, too. 14 years later, the only thing that has changed is the desperation behind the promises.
When Haslam stood at that podium on January 6, 2026, after firing his head coach Kevin Stefanski, he took accountability in a way that was almost shocking in its rawness. "Ownership takes full responsibility for where we are," he said. "To win 8 games in 2 years is horrible. It's totally unacceptable, and it's not going to continue. I want the fans to know we are as frustrated as you are. We have great fans. They're extremely passionate, and they deserve better than what they've gotten the last 2 years." Heavy sports.
Deserved better. Those 2 words landed on Cleveland fans like a bucket of cold Lake Erie water. They had heard promises before, from previous coaches, previous coordinators, previous quarterbacks, from Haslam himself. But this time, something was different in his voice. Something was different in his eyes. He wasn't just promising a better record. He was promising a complete reconstruction. And to punctuate that promise, he gave himself and his organization a deadline. "The next 120 days are crucial for the organization," Haslam declared. "We've got to find the right head coach. We've got to be efficient again in free agency. We have 10 draft picks, including 2 number 1s. We have 4 picks in the top 3 rounds, and we've got to get really good players who are really good people again. We've got to be opportunistic if trade opportunities come along. We are solely focused on having a great 120 days so we can start winning games around here." Pro Football Network, Dogs by Nature. 120 days, a public countdown clock, a self-imposed guillotine. Either the Cleveland Browns would use those 4 months to completely transform their franchise, or the world would know definitively that Jimmy Haslam simply does not have what it takes to build a winner. The clock started ticking, and the first task on the checklist was the biggest one of all: finding a head coach. Kevin Stefanski had been the head coach for 6 years, the longest tenure at the position since Sam Rutigliano coached Cleveland from 1978 to 1983. Pro Football Network. Stefanski was respected, he was organized, he was a genuinely good human being, and Haslam acknowledged all of it at his firing press conference, calling the decision extremely difficult because of the quality of person involved. But the results had been catastrophic. 3-14 in 2024, 5-12 in 2025, 8 wins across 2 seasons. The Browns were 31st of 32 NFL teams in scoring during the 2025 season, averaging only 16.4 points per game, and 30th in total yards with just 262.1 per contest. Heavy sports. That offense was not just bad, it was embarrassingly historically bad, and Stefanski, despite his personal qualities, could not fix it.
So Haslam went hunting. The coaching market in January 2026 was one of the wildest in recent NFL history. 8 jobs opened simultaneously, a carousel of names spinning constantly across sports media. There was initial intrigue around John Harbaugh, the legendary Baltimore Ravens head coach, who was believed to have genuine interest in coaching the Browns, even knowing the challenging quarterback situation and the offensive rebuild ahead. Think about that for a second. The man who had dominated the Browns for years, going 28-8 against Cleveland as Baltimore's head coach, was reportedly interested in coming to rescue them. The football gods truly do have a sense of humor. But in the end, it was not Harbaugh who walked through the door. It was someone just as fascinating and in some ways even more intriguing. On January 28, 2026, the Cleveland Browns announced the hiring of Todd Monken as their new head coach, the former offensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens, the man who had just helped Lamar Jackson win another MVP award and guided one of the most explosive offenses in recent NFL history. Heavy sports, Monken was not a household name to casual fans, but inside NFL circles, he was regarded as one of the most creative, adaptable, and brilliant offensive minds in the game. A man who had worked with air raid schemes in college, shifted to pro-style concepts in Tampa Bay, mastered the power run game at Georgia, and then reimagined the modern passing attack in Baltimore. He could do it all, and more importantly, he could teach. Haslam was effusive about the hire. He's won with Nick Mullins, Jameis Winston, Stetson Bennett IV, and Lamar Jackson, all of whom have entirely different skill sets, Haslam said. And he's won running the ball, he's won passing the ball. He was a really attractive candidate. Heavy sports, Haslam then added 3 words that every Browns fan needed to hear. I'm highly confident. Box number 1 on the 120-day checklist? Checked. And not just checked with a name that instantly changed the perception of Cleveland's football future. But here is where the story gets incredibly layered, because Monken's arrival did not just bring a new offensive system to Cleveland, it brought a fascinating, complicated, almost soap opera-level dynamic to the quarterback room. Because Todd Monken had been with the Baltimore Ravens, the same Baltimore Ravens that had reportedly tried to draft Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round of the 2025 NFL Draft. According to reports, Sanders had actually told the Ravens not to draft him because he did not want to serve as a backup behind Lamar Jackson, a bona fide franchise quarterback with no plans to go anywhere. So here was Monken, the man whose offense Sanders had specifically chosen not to join, now walking into Cleveland as Sanders' new head coach. Their first meeting, by all accounts, included Monken poking fun at that exact decision. A little dark comedy, a little ice-breaking, the kind of thing that tells you both men understood the absurdity of the situation and were ready to move past it. But Monken was careful, strategic. He was not going to walk into a new job on day 1 and hand out guarantees. When asked directly at his introductory press conference if Shedeur Sanders was his definitive QB1, Monken said the situation was still to be determined, though he made clear he was absolutely excited about Sanders and the rest of the quarterbacks on the roster. Hall of Football. That answer was crafted, professional, non-committal in the way that only a new head coach with a complicated roster can be. Because the reality was clear, there was a $230 million problem sitting in the quarterback room named Deshaun Watson, and Monken had to at least pay lip service to an open competition. But then, 3 weeks later, at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Monken dropped his most revealing answer yet. Sure he can, Monken said, when asked if Sanders could be the Browns starter in 2026. I think what you see is elite playmaking ability. That's in him. You've seen it, we've seen it. You saw it in college, you saw it on tape last year. Sure, there's a ways to go, but what rookie isn't? What first-year player doesn't have a long way to go? So I'm excited to get started with him. ESPN. Elite playmaking ability. Those are not the words of a head coach who is on the fence. Those are the words of a man who has studied the tape and seen something real, something that excites him, something worth building around. And General Manager Andrew Berry was just as clear. I think the biggest thing that we want to see from Shedeur is just continued growth, Berry said at the Combine. I think he grew a lot from start 1 to start 7. Playing more efficiently, not putting the ball in harm's way as much would be important, while maintaining the ability to produce out of structure and generate explosive plays. ESPN. That is the language of a man talking about his quarterback's development, not his replacement. Now, let's zoom in on that rookie season, because the numbers, taken out of context, look concerning. Shedeur Sanders completed 56.6% of his passes for 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions in 7 starts. Wikipedia. The interceptions are the ugly number, the one critics will point to forever. But context matters here. It matters enormously. Shedeur Sanders spent the first half of his rookie season buried on the depth chart, 4th on the roster, behind Joe Flacco and others. He wasn't just learning the game from the bench, he was watching a franchise in absolute chaos, cycling through quarterbacks, changing game plans week by week, behind an offensive line that was among the worst in protecting the quarterback in the entire league.
When he finally got his chance, it was because of injuries, not a planned succession. He was thrown into the deep end without a life jacket.
And still, he showed flashes, real ones, the kind that make offensive coaches stop their film sessions and rewind. Even Monken, after reviewing the tape, pointed out something that did not show up in any stat line. Shedeur surprised me a little bit in terms of mobile might be too strong, but he's got a knack. He's got a feel. Like he does in playmaking, he has a real sense in the pocket when it starts to collapse and moving around the pocket. He made more plays or got himself out of trouble than I would have thought even coming out, which was nice to see. A head coach reviewing film for the first time on his new quarterback and coming away surprised in a good way. That is significant. That is a building block. And despite the stats, Sanders was selected to the Pro Bowl as a rookie. Hall of Football. Yes, the Pro Bowl, with 7 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. That tells you something about the talent evaluators around the league. Even the people watching from the outside could see what the tape showed. That beneath the turnovers, beneath the chaos, beneath the broken offensive line and the mid-season chaos, there was something there. Something that belonged at the highest level. Myles Garrett, the reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year, the best player on the Browns and one of the best players in the entire league, made the situation perfectly clear on Micah Parsons' podcast. Sanders is who we're looking at as the guy, Garrett said. We're going to give him a shot to prove that he's the guy. We're not going to give anyone that title until they go out there and earn it. University of Colorado Athletics. The best player on the Cleveland Browns, the anchor of their defense, the man who has stayed through the disaster years, through the Watson nightmare, through the perpetual losing, he is publicly saying Shedeur Sanders is the guy they are looking at. That carries more weight than any front office press conference. Players know. Players always know.
And then came free agency. And this is where the 120-day ultimatum story takes its most traumatic turn yet. The NFL free agency period opened on March 11, 2026. The quarterback market was absolutely loaded. Kyler Murray was available. Tua Tagovailoa was on the move. Justin Fields was being shopped. Veterans, starters, genuine NFL-caliber signal callers were circulating through the league. Every team with a quarterback need was making calls, making offers, making trades. And Cleveland? Cleveland sat on their hands. The Browns did not get involved in Malik Willis's free agency. He signed with the Dolphins. They stayed out of the Kyler Murray sweepstakes, who went to the Vikings. They did not pursue Tua Tagovailoa, who landed in Atlanta. They did not touch Justin Fields, who was traded to the Chiefs. Every available quarterback found a new home, and none of them were wearing orange and brown. The Browns watched the entire carousel spin by and never once reached out to grab a horse. Now, you could interpret that 2 ways. You could say Cleveland was passive. You could say they were asleep. You could say they missed the window. But here is the other interpretation, the one that people like veteran analysts were making publicly within hours of free agency opening. Cleveland did exactly what they intended to do. They chose Shedeur Sanders. Not by announcing it, not by handing him a guaranteed contract, but by process of elimination, by building a wall around him without ever saying his name. One prominent analyst put it directly. Sanders might be the big winner here, as the Cleveland Browns did precisely what first-year coach Todd Monken wanted, pouring into their offensive line. Guard Tevin Jenkins re-signed. Offensive lineman Titus Howard arrived via trade. Zion Johnson and Elkton Jenkins are both on the way to further fortify the interior, and more offensive upgrades are likely coming in the draft, where GM Andrew Berry owns a pair of first-round picks, including Jacksonville's. It should mean a magnificent opportunity for Sanders to assert himself as QB1 in 2026. Read that again. The Browns re-signed their guard. They traded for an offensive lineman. They signed 2 more interior linemen. They are building a wall in front of their quarterback. And they are doing it without signing anyone to compete with that quarterback. That is not an accident. That is a message, delivered not in words, but in contracts and trade announcements.
Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com, one of the most connected and respected Browns insiders in the business, was equally direct in her analysis. "I don't see any rookie coming in and overtaking Shedeur Sanders this season," Cabot wrote. And on the Watson question, "I actually think Browns GM Andrew Berry and Todd Monken are excited about what they've seen from Sanders, so I wouldn't necessarily say they're leaning toward Watson at this point." Watson, the elephant in the room, the $230 million mistake, the man whose contract represents one of the most catastrophic financial decisions in NFL history. Watson did not play at all in 2025. He missed the entire season on the physically unable to perform list after sustaining a right Achilles tear in October 2024, then re-tearing it and requiring a second surgery in January 2025. In his 3 seasons actually playing for Cleveland, he went 9-10 as a starter, while completing 61% of his passes for 3,365 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. The Browns traded 3 first-round picks and gave him a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract in March 2022. He has played in only 19 games since. University of Colorado Athletics. 3 first-round picks, $250 million, for 19 games of mediocre football and 2 Achilles surgeries. It is, by any objective measure, the worst quarterback contract in the history of the National Football League. And the Browns are living with it every single day. Watson's cap hit in 2026 is staggering. The Browns still owe Watson $46 million in salary next season, with an $80.7 million cap hit in 2026, the largest cap number in the entire NFL. University of Colorado Athletics. The largest single cap hit in the entire league for a man who may never again be the quarterback he was in Houston.
That number is a boulder around Cleveland's ankles. And yet, even with that boulder, even with $80.7 million committed to a man who hasn't played in over a year, the Browns are still choosing to invest in Shedeur Sanders, still building the offensive line, still bringing in a head coach who talks about Sanders' elite playmaking ability, still not signing another quarterback. Because when you have already thrown away $250 million, you cannot afford to make another panic move. You have to get this one right. And the front office quietly believes they already got it right. On Draft Day 2025, in the 5th round at pick 144. There was a remarkable detail that emerged about the Browns' head coaching search. According to Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, one of the 6 standardized questions asked of every head coaching candidate was, "How would you develop Shedeur Sanders?" He was one of 3 players specifically mentioned in that question. Pro Football Reference. Think about what that reveals. In a head coach search, one of the most important decisions an organization makes, Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry sat down with every candidate and asked them about developing Shedeur Sanders. That is not the behavior of an organization that views him as a placeholder. That is the behavior of an organization that has already decided this is their quarterback and is now selecting the best man to help him reach his potential. And beyond the field, Jimmy Haslam is simultaneously building something else entirely, a new stadium. The Browns owner confirmed that groundbreaking is set for construction of a new domed stadium in Brook Park. Haslam said he is not worried about the pending lawsuits that could interfere with the project, stating with confidence that the situation is solved. A new dome, a new offensive line, a new head coach, a new quarterback. Haslam is not rebuilding one thing in Cleveland. He is rebuilding everything. Dogs by nature. The owner himself has set the expectation for 2026. Do I expect we will win more games? I do. And I think we'll have a better football team, and we're not going to be ugly to watch, Haslam said, referencing a local columnist's brutal but accurate description of the 2025 Browns offense. We want it to be a fun team to watch, a team that plays hard, plays smart, and most of all, wins. Heavy sports. Fun.
That word alone would have seemed impossible in Cleveland just 1 year ago. The 2025 Browns offense was not just bad, it was a punishment to watch. 31st in scoring, 30th in yards, 3 different starting quarterbacks, no identity, no rhythm, no hope. And now, the same owner who presided over that disaster is standing in front of cameras and talking about a fun team, an entertaining offense, something worth watching. Because Todd Monken makes things worth watching. That is his reputation. That is his calling card. At Georgia, he took Stetson Bennett, an unheralded walk-on quarterback, and built 2 national championship offenses around him. In Baltimore, he took an already elite Lamar Jackson and helped him have one of the greatest individual seasons in quarterback history. And now he is in Cleveland, sitting across from a second-year quarterback who has elite arm talent, elite football instincts, a chip on his shoulder the size of Lake Erie, and a new offensive line being built specifically to protect him. The ingredients are there. They are not perfect yet. There are still holes. The receiver room needs help. The running game needs to develop. Watson is still technically competition. The draft will bring new names, new dynamics, new pressure. But when you step back and look at the full picture, the head coach hire, the offensive line investments, the quarterback decisions made and not made in free agency, the insider language from the general manager and the head coach, the public statements from Myles Garrett, the analysis from the most connected Browns reporters in the country, it all points to one man, one story, one future. Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland Browns, QB1, 2026. The 120-day clock Jimmy Haslam started on January 6th still has roughly 60 days left on it. The draft in Pittsburgh is still to come. Training camp is still ahead. The competition with Watson will play out. There will be twists, there always are in Cleveland, but the foundation, the non-negotiable, increasingly undeniable foundation, is being poured right now.